Good morning. Hi, I'm Dave A. Jubilado from BACE 1B, Group 1. Instrumental and Intrinsic goodness. To appreciate moral philosophy, you must understand the different perspectives on the notion of goodness. Is there a clear and unwavering line between good and bad? What is the relationship between the ends and the means in generating good and bad outcomes? Is there some way to determine if the ends can be identified independently as good or bad? Because the answers can be complex and confusing. We have simplified the discussion.
Everyone wants to live a good life, but what does it mean to live a good life? To answer that, we need to get clear on what good means. When we say something is good or valuable, there are two different things we can mean. We might mean that something is good for its own sake, or good period. Alternatively, we might mean that something is good insofar as it serves its purpose, or that it's good because it helps us get something else. These two different kinds of goods are what philosophers call intrinsic goods and instrumental goods. To better understand this difference, let's look at some examples. Think about money. Is money good? Well, it's good, but only because we can use it to buy other things. It's not good all on its own. That is, it's not intrinsically good. No one wants money just for money's sake. People want money because they can use it. It serves a purpose. It helps them get what they want. So we can say that money is instrumentally good. But now consider a different example. Happiness. Most people want to be happy. But why? What is happiness good for? Or to put it another way, why do you want to be happy? You might have a hard time answering this question because it's a strange question. We don't want happiness because it gets us something else. We want to be happy simply because we want to be happy. It seems that happiness is good for its own sake. It's intrinsically good. Philosophers can argue about which things are intrinsically good and which things are merely instrumentally good. But the important point here is that now you know the difference between those two terms. Something is intrinsically good when it's just good. Something is instrumentally good when it's good for some other reason.
And there are two basic concepts of goodness: the monism and pluralism. Two basic concepts of goodness are monism and pluralism. Monists believe only one thing is intrinsically good, and pluralists believe two or more things are intrinsically good. Monists are often characterized by Hinduism. Monism is the metaphysical and theological view that all is one, that there are no fundamental divisions, and that an unified set of laws underlie all of nature. The universe at the deepest level of analysis is then one thing or composed of one fundamental kind of. And pluralism is a political philosophy holding that people of different beliefs, backgrounds, and lifestyle can coexist in the same society and participate equally in the political process. Next page, table 6. 1. A comparison of the philosophies used in a business decision. First is teleology. It stipulates acts are morally right or acceptable if they produce some desired result, such as realization of self-interest or utility. What does teleology mean in philosophy? Teleology from Greek telos is end, and logos is reason. Explanation by reference to some purpose, end, goal, or function. Traditionally, it was also described as final causality, in contrast with explanation solely in terms of efficient causes, the origin of a change or a state of rest in something. Second is egoism. Egoism defines right or acceptable actions as those that maximize a particular person. Self-interest as defined by individual. In egoism in philosophy is the theory that oneself is or should be the motivation and the goal of one's own action. Egoism has two variants, descriptive or normative. Third is utilitarianism.
Utilitarianism is an
It
ethical theory that determines right from wrong by focusing on outcomes. It is a form of consequentialism. Utilitarianism holds that the most ethical choice is the one that will produce the greatest good for the greatest number. It is the only moral framework that can be used to justify military force or war. It is also the most common approach to moral reasoning used in business because of the way in which it accounts for costs and benefits. However, because we cannot predict the future, it's difficult to know with certainty whether the consequences of our actions will be good or bad. This is one of the limitations of utilitarianism.
philosophy, ethical theories that place special emphasis on the relationship between duty and the morality of human actions. The term deontology is derived from the Greek deion, means duty, and logos means science. Relativist evaluates ethicalness subjectively on the basis of individual and group experience. Relativism is the claim that standard of truth, rationality, and ethical right and wrong vary greatly between cultures and historical epochs, and that there are no universal criteria for adjudicating between them. The virtue ethics assumes what is moral in a given situation is not only what conventional morality requires but also what the mature person with a good or moral character deems appropriate. Virtue is a broad term for theories that emphasize the role of character and virtue in moral philosophy rather than either doing one's duty or acting in order to bring out good consequences. The justice. Justice evaluates ethicalness on the basis of fairness, distributive, procedural, and ethical and interactional. It is the identical quality that makes a good and social. Justice is an order and duty of parts of the soul. It is to the soul as a health is to the body. The next page. Pluralism. Pluralism is a term used in philosophy meaning doctrine of multiplicity, often used in opposition to monism, doctrine of unity, and dualism, doctrine of duality. The term has different meanings in metaphysics, ontology, epistemology, and logic. Instrumentalism. In the philosophy of science, the view that the value of scientific concepts and theories is determined not by whether they are literally true or correspond to reality in some sense, but by the extent to which they help to make accurate empirical predictions or to resolve conceptual problems. Goodness theories typically focus on the end result of action and goodness or happiness created by them. Obligation theories emphasizes the means and motives by which action are justified and are divided into the categories of theology and deontology. There are two types of egoism, the egoism and enlightened egoism. Egoism defines right or acceptable behavior in terms of its consequences for the individual. Egoists believe they should make decisions that maximize their own self-interest, which is defined differently by each individual. Enlightened egoism is take a long-range perspective that allow for the well-being of others, although their own self-interest remains paramount. For example, of enlightened egoism. Enlightened egoism is like a self-interest is related to the golden rule, simply acting toward all the others the way one wants them to act towards oneself. The reasoning. Okay, for example, I will not steal because if I steal, then other may steal from me, and the creation of a thieving society will likely hurt me. Utilitarian role. This role, utilitarians determine behavior on the basis of principles or rules designed to promote the greatest utility, rather than on individual examination of each situation they encounter. One such rule might be bravery is wrong. What is the basic principle of rule utilitarianism? The idea behind rule utilitarianism is that whenever you are in situation and have alternative, you calculate the utility to be produced by adopting a course of action, which would produce the greatest utility in the long run if it were followed every time that situation arose. Act utilitarian. These utilitarians believe that whenever we are deciding what to do, we should perform the action that will create the greatest net utility. In their view, the principle of utility, do whatever will produce the best overall result, should be applied on a case by case basis.